Today our world is experiencing an accelerating level of change, unprecedented in modern times. We are confronted with new and emerging technologies. The multiple impacts of globalization and demographic shifts. Then there is the challenge of discrimination and racism. And what about the uncertain consequences of a global pandemic and the uncomfortable reality of a changing climate? Changes that will impact our societies and will have a big influence on our own well-being. But most importantly, will determine the well-being of future generations. We have a choice. We can passively watch it all happen, or we can individually and collectively take action to create a world that's better for everyone. For the last 2 decades there has been growing evidence that human beings need to both feel good and function well. The science of well-being. Based on a growing body of research, it is proven that together we can create a better future for humanity and the planet we share. A group of scientists immersed in positive psychology proposes that the science of well-being can provide a new paradigm to help shape a different future. Drawing on their different individual fields of expertise, they had ideas for how this emerging body of knowledge could provide the basis for innovation and change. Bring the science to life and engage hearts as well as minds, and provoke and maintain a global conversation. They gently challenge possibly long-held views, beliefs, and ideologies. And invite you to create the world we want to live in.
Welcome to this book launch. We would like to encourage you to put your name and location in the chat. We hope it will help us to connect better. We are a group of 7 authors. I'm Dora Guðmundsdóttir from Iceland. From UK, we have Bridget Greenwell-Cleave.
Hello.
Vanessa King.
Hi.
Sue Roffey.
Hello.
David Roffey. And then from the Netherlands, we have Marten de Vries.
Hello.
And all the way from Australia, we have Felicia Hubbard, who unfortunately cannot be with us due to the time differences. Together, we have made this book, Creating the World We Want to Live in, How Positive Psychology Can Build a Brighter Future. It all started at the European Conference on Positive Psychology in Angers in France in 2016, after a symposium on positive society, led by Professor Felicia Hubbard, the director of the Wellbeing Institute at Cambridge University at that time, and few of us participated in that symposium. Our aim has been to move positive psychology beyond well-being for individuals into a more ecosystemic framework that encompasses life stages, contributing factors such as health and relationships, and a final section on society, economics, politics, and the environment. We are a group of people who wants to have a positive impact on the world. Our aim is to inspire others to see why we urgently need a different approach to how we live our lives and why we need to make changes, both individually and with others. We are now going to hear from each of the authors. Please add your comments or questions into the chat since we're having Q&A at the end. We will start to hear from Felicia, who has made us a recording from Australia.
Our small group came together through the shared belief that the ideas from positive psychology that have been so effective in creating individual flourishing had the potential to do so much more. We believed they could be applied at the collective and organizational level and also at the societal level to help solve some of the big problems in the world. Problems such as inequality and racism, political polarization, the increase in fake news and disinformation, and of course the enormous problems associated with climate change. At the heart of these problems lie individualism, self-interest, and short-term motivation. So the problems will never be solved unless we make a shift in our focus from me to we, and from short-term thinking to longer-term thinking. But how do we make that shift? In the introduction to the book, based on the science of well-being, we identify 3 core capabilities that are foundational to flourishing, both at the individual and the collective level. These are an open mind, an open heart, and clear thinking. An open mind is about really noticing what's happening inside us and outside us from moment to moment. And when we notice this and pause, we have choices about how to respond rather than reacting automatically. An open heart is about acting with kindness and compassion towards ourselves and others. And clear thinking involves the careful evaluation of information, taking note of biases in ourselves and in others. The good thing is that we can learn these skills and practice them to act more wisely in the world. And I'd just like to take an example of how these can be used to deal with our biggest problem, which is the problem of global warming and climate change. Beginning with mindfulness, if we become aware of the choices we make on an everyday basis in energy use, transport, food and clothing, and notice whether our choices are sustainable or whether we're taking the easy or cheap options, we can then choose to make wiser choices. We can also recognize that when we do so, we have a sense of pride in having made a good decision. And this pride is increased if we work with a community to make sustainable decisions and also influence policymakers and governments in this way. In the case of compassion, we can be compassionate towards all living things. And this motivates us to cherish nature and biodiversity and work to preserve them and to nurture them. Clear thinking about environmental information involves understanding the source of the information and the motivation behind it. In the book, we suggest ways in which these ideas can be used more widely to create a flourishing, fair, and sustainable world. And we invite you to reflect on actions that you might like to take.
Thanks to Felicia. And now we will move to Vanessa King. The screen is yours, Vanessa.
Thanks, Dora. Thank you. Building on the foundation of the 3 core capabilities that Felicia outlined, we have also identified 5 key psychological principles which can be applied to help us think differently about our systems in the different domains of life and society to create the infrastructure and the architecture of well-being. We can think of these as evidence-based design principles for well-being. Now, of course, many factors influence how we feel. Our physical needs are important: enough food, clean water, good health, safe place to live. But these are necessary, but they're not sufficient for truly flourishing. Evidence from positive psychology and the science of well-being show that there are also psychological factors that are essential for flourishing. And whilst these principles are derived from research on individual well-being, we believe they can be applied to fuel innovation and to shape our education system, our workplaces, health, policy, and politics. They can help in challenging old ways and in designing new solutions. And each of our chapters in the book explores how, in the different domains of life and society, we can do this. And it provides ideas and solutions to current issues. So what are the principles for psychological well-being that we've chosen to focus on in this book? Well, first, there is feeling connected to other people. Well-being begins with we. Human beings are social creatures. So whether we are introvert or extrovert, we all need to feel seen and connected to others. And in fact, feeling excluded activates the same brain regions as physical pain. And loneliness, we know, is as detrimental to physical health as smoking or obesity. So we explore how applying this principle can, for example, help ensure our communities and workplaces are places where people feel cared for, seen, and there's trust and support for each other. The second principle is a sense of autonomy. This is about having a sense of control. It's a core psychological need. We all need to feel we have some choice and input and volition over our lives, regardless of our culture and across our lives, and it's across the lifespan too. This doesn't mean that we have to have complete autonomy. I mean, that's hard in a social group, but at a family or a community or a workplace level, for example, we can apply this principle to involve others, to seek input, give feedback, share ideas, and give people some degree of choice. Thirdly, there's feeling competent. Human beings need to feel that they can function effectively and feel a sense of progress. Persistent feelings of incompetence, in fact, are very detrimental to well-being. And applying this principle means perhaps that we make sure that our systems, our products, and our processes are inclusive and easy to navigate for all. And in a world that's rapidly changing, supporting people's ability to learn throughout life becomes ever more vital. Fourthly, there's paying attention to what's going well. We, of course, need to address issues and problems rather than ignore them. Wellbeing research shows that there are extensive wellbeing benefits and practical benefits that come from also noticing and building on what's already right. Practices such as appreciative inquiry seek to identify and develop a system's strengths, show how this idea can be used for extensive organizational and community change. Constructive journalism doesn't just highlight issues and apportion blame, as another example, but it also explores solutions and what has worked elsewhere. And in the society chapter, we explore how this idea can be applied to the justice system, for example, for greater societal benefit than purely punitive approaches. And finally, a sense of meaning. Meaning arises when people feel part of and contributing to something bigger. Communities can facilitate meaning by helping their members feel they belong, that they matter, and facilitate ways that everybody can make a difference in their own way. So we'll hope you'll join us in being part of something bigger, in applying ideas sparked by this book to do what you can to create a brighter world and a brighter future for us all. Thank you. And now I'll hand back to Dora. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Let's now take a closer look at the book. We will start by a video and a message from Sue Roffey.
We believe everyone is entitled to a life in which they can flourish and find joy in their existence. And that's why we've written this book. We wanted to explore what the science and stories of positive psychology could tell us about how to create a world where all people have the best possible chance of well-being. This includes not only what individuals might do, but what we need from our communities, institutions and governments. We've been asking searching questions and have challenged what many take for granted. But we hold on to the science that says we are born to connect, that happiness can be found by having meaning in our lives, and that empathy for others is hardwired until it is broken, but then can also be relearnt. The pandemic itself has often brought out the best in us, and we feel the better for it. This little one was born in the middle of the pandemic and is lucky to have our own well-being bubble, loving family, food, shelter, and good health. But what of her future and the world into which she has been born? And the future of every other child? This is an ambitious project, idealistic even. But what we have discovered is that many of our fellow citizens are already creating a better world, both locally in their own communities and beyond. We just need more of it, and soon. The future of the post-pandemic generation is depending on us.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming to our launch. I'm going to speak briefly about the chapters on childhood, education and relationships and the links between these. We all want children to be happy and healthy, of course we do. But if we want to create a world where all of us, now and in the future, have the chance of optimal well-being, we need to go much, much further in raising the next generation. Young people need to learn what is important, not just for their own well-being, but for our planet and the people in it. In the childhood chapter, I quote a 2014 Harvard study of over 10,000 young people who were asked what was important in their lives. And it became clear that the messages children were getting from both families and schools were primarily about self-interest, me, and how well I am doing in comparison to others, rather than the sustainable happiness to be found in positive connection, fairness, kindness, meaning, and purpose. No wonder we have an escalating mental health crisis. It's the young people growing up now who will become our politicians, company directors, educators, parents, and consumers of the future. Our book and the website contain many suggestions for what families and schools might do to grow children who will become caring, ethical, and active adults. So if you are an educator or a parent, please check these out. There are plenty of role models for young people, from Emma Gonzalez on gun control to Greta Thunberg on climate change, and a wonderful 14-year-old boy I heard on the radio recently asking how he could encourage his mates to stand up to misogyny and stop objectifying women. The current world leaders have not made such a good job of creating a better world. Let's find ways to ensure our kids get the chance. I'd now like you to meet my fellow author, Vanessa King.
Just briefly talk to you about the chapter on work. It's an area I'm particularly passionate about. I mean, work takes up a huge proportion of most adults' lives. And well-being, our well-being matters for work. That's clear from the evidence. But good work also matters for well-being. Not having work, in fact, when we want it and being made redundant are actually detrimental to well-being well beyond the financial impact, and it's an impact that lasts. All too many of us know firsthand that work can also be a source of excessive and unhealthy chronic stress and unhappiness, which, as well as being a source of ill-being for us individually, actually impacts our productivity and our creativity, and so the economy. And importantly too, it ripples out to our families and to our communities. So in this book, we argue that good work is in fact a corporate social responsibility. And workplaces can be a force for good. And in this chapter, we explore how, through embedding the psychological principles into the processes and ecosystems of organizations, and considering both the employed, the contractors, and the gig workers that support them, we can actually shape the what, how, and who of work to better enable flourishing. And there are some good examples already that we can learn from. Good work really matters for us all. And this chapter we hope sparks some ideas on how to make work better. So handing now over to Bridget.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. And I'm going to talk about the leisure chapter and the ageing chapter. So leisure first. The importance of having a good work-life balance has been an important topic for several decades, and the pandemic has brought it into sharper focus. The more we work from home, the more our work and home lives merge. So our free time and how we spend it becomes more important for our well-being. Some things we do in our spare time, like watching TV or scrolling through social media, can help us relax after a hard day's work, but they don't do much for health and well-being in the longer term. Whereas other leisure activities are the opposite. In time, they work out better for well-being, even though they can actually increase stress levels in the moment. For example, one of my friends recently started doing stand-up comedy, which he said is hard work, stressful, and really not that much fun yet. Many hobbies which demand initial effort, like playing a musical instrument, can also induce flow and over time make a significant contribution to our sense of competence. And of course, hobbies which involve other people, like team sports or volunteering, they also meet our human needs for connection and belonging. So what activities do you like to do in your spare time, and in what way do they contribute to your well-being? So I'll just leave that one with you and then move on to talk about aging, which is something that matters to all of us because we're all getting older, whether we want to or not. But we do seem to be a little bit fixated on staying young. The European anti-aging market, which includes things like wrinkle creams and hair restoration, is forecast to grow to nearly $20 billion a year in the next 4 years. And that's a massive industry which is focused on pushing the message that we're not valued if we don't look and feel younger. But if we only see later life as a negative, as a time of poor health and frailty, we're not doing ourselves justice. We can, and we argue in this book, we could see aging in a much more positive light, not only because older age can be enjoyable and meaningful, but also because people don't stop being valued and valuable just because they pass 60, 70 or 80. So this chapter is more of a celebration of aging well. And there are lots of role models of positive aging out there. It's just we don't tend to give them much attention. So who would be your positive aging role model? Between you and me, I can tell you who I would choose because she's not here to object, and that's Felicia. So on that note, I'm going to hand back to Dora to talk about health.
Thank you so much, Bridget. I will start also that I was very honored when Felicia contacted me and asked me to co-write this health chapter with her and Marten. Because for the last 2 decades, it has been my passion to build a bridge between positive psychology and public health. Because the aim there is shared. It's how we can increase health and well-being. The focus is on health and well-being. Because surprisingly, very often when we talk about health, we are not talking about health, we are talking about diseases, and the whole healthcare system is about diseases rather than health. But it is clear that health is so much more than diseases. And it's important to be aware of that. And according to WHO, health is created and lived by people within the settings of their everyday life, where they learn, work, play, and love. So in our health chapter, we ask you to reflect with us. How would you describe good health? Are there things you are already doing to lead a healthy life? What do you think would be needed to optimize health for all? We emphasize how important it is to take into account how much impact the society has on our health. It's not just our individual choices, because how easy is it actually for us to make healthy choices? There are so many factors that has an impact on that. It is crucial to take a more holistic approach to a whole of society view on health. And then we want to consider what might governments, local communities, healthcare systems, schools, families, and you and us together do to improve our health and well-being. So that was from the health chapter, and then I'll give over the screen over to you, Marten. You were writing the health chapter with us, but you were also involved media and community. The screen is yours now.
I'll be making some comments on media and community. And first of all, let me say what a joy it was to have been working with all of you, your passion and your distinguished way to approach the positive psychology. And over the last years, it's been a warm, inspiring, and positive learning experience, I hope for all of us, especially for me. So I very much appreciate that the book can get some legs and reach more in the world. It certainly touched me. I've been passionate, like many of us, for many things, but for years about the constructive use of media for improving mental resilience in global communities. The chapters on media, community, and health that I contributed to are intertwined with these goals and anchored in the focus of well-being of positive psychology. Like the Zoom we're on now, media has become the mainstay of modern life, particularly during the pandemic, as we were divorced from our face-to-face social interactions. Our reliance on media has increased manifold. Our communities on the one hand, are the workplace of our identity, our well-being, for social change, support, and the growth of empathy. Today's media use, such as the shared entertainment that we use today, neighborhood and family apps, which are so prevalent, have become intertwined with community and family life. This has resulted in a greater degree of openness and much more connectivity, but also negative use and manipulation, which is hiding in plain sight around every corner. We need to guard against media misuse and other economic and political challenge to our vulnerable communities. How we use media will to a large extent shape our future. We must assure it remains in accordance with our values and provides trustworthy information. Positive psychology can help in creating a more human media through its focus on compassionate communication and securing well-being. We need to contribute actively. We need to share our stories from all walks of life. We need to control the media we're involved with. This will be key in ensuring media will be honorable and positive in our future. One of the aims of our approach, the me to we approach of this book, is to help in forging supportive communities. And in part, this will be possible through positive and compassionate use of media. Thank you. And I think I'll pass it to David now.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk about politics and economics. They have an enormous influence over all aspects of our lives and, of course, our well-being. Many of the issues we face today are complex and global and unlikely to be solved by one political party or one country acting alone. We stand a much better chance if we work together. We've learned from the COVID-19 crisis that cooperation is actually possible. Positive politics isn't just about how different policies or processes impact on our well-being, but how the science of well-being can impact politics and change it for the better, increasing trust, increasing listening and collaborating for the common good. Positive economics is about building an economic system that brings about the best in people, not the worst, recognises the costs that economic actions have on our communities and supports people who need to change the way they do things. The last year has shown that, contrary to much that has been said before, huge sums of public and private money can be diverted to making things work better if the political will is there. If economic and social policies were to be focused on increasing the nation's well-being, society could be more tolerant, cohesive, resilient. Making political and economic decisions based on what increases well-being should be at the heart of a well-functioning society and a resilient, collaborative and thriving world. And hand over to Sue to talk about society.
Felicia and I took a deep breath and wrote 4,000 words or so on what makes for a good society. Now, considering that there are whole university faculties devoted to this, it was either courageous or foolhardy of us to even attempt this, and we have to leave you to decide. So I will just read what we said at the beginning of that chapter. Imagine a society where kindness is the default mode of interaction and people are not hungry, homeless, or rejected because of their race, religion, gender, disability, sexual orientation, or social position. A future in which everyone is flourishing and valued equally. What difference would it make if promoting the common good was a central principle in policy making and not just an empty electioneering promise? Now, this utopian vision is almost laughable, except that there are efforts at making it happen, and overall, things are moving in a more positive direction. We identified some of these things in the chapter, and many more are on the website. But it takes all of us, not just a brave few. The quote from Nelson Mandela at the beginning of the chapter says, "It is in your hands to create a better world for all who live in it." And as Greta Thunberg says, hope is not in words. Hope lies in action.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all authors for giving us insight into each chapter. We will now move from us, the 7 of us, over to other people and then over to you. We would like to think, what do other people think about these topics? And we will start by showing you a short Vox Pops video made by Emma Marshall, especially for us, and we would like to thank her deeply for that. Let's take a look at the video.
So one thing I would change about the world right now would be to have everyone have a little bit more empathy, to just care a little bit more about things that they don't feel directly affected by. I think if we could just stop shutting ourselves off from so much injustice and heartache around the world, if we could all just care a little bit more, we'd just make a huge difference.
I'd say bringing the understanding of kind of mental health and psychological research into just how we make societies, how we make decisions at a government level, because it is so lacking and it is all focused on so many of the wrong types of values: fear, competition, greed, as our own Prime Minister has said this week. That is a recipe for mental health problems.
There are a lot of stories where people have had autonomy taken away from them, and they have not had, been given certain choices to be able to exercise autonomy, which is a very important part of being able to, feel fulfilled and, actualize in the world. And, that is a very important part of well-being, which I'm very much an advocate of community psychology, in that, how do we empower people? How do we empower this system to actually promote that?
Obviously, we all have different experiences, but if we could just accept that everybody has equity, we're all equitable to each other, that nobody has more rights than anybody else, and we really shouldn't be taking more than we need. Because when we do that, we hurt somebody or something else. And I just think if we were just less selfish and started to actually realise that true happiness comes when all of us win, rather than just one of us wins at the expense of another.
Okay, I only have one question so far, and it's a question for Bridget. What would you like, it comes from Miriam Akhtar, what would you like to see happen as a result of the book, next steps after the book?
That's a really good question, Miriam. So thanks very much for asking that. I think there are a number of things that we hope for really as a result of the book. Firstly, for more people to explore what positive psychology has to offer. So, to really look at the science of well-being, whether that's as a professional, doing a master's course like some of us have done, or whether that's doing more condensed versions of positive psychology courses like the one that Action for Happiness runs, or indeed the positive psychology masterclass. So that would be the first thing, because I think positive psychology has got so much to offer people in terms of increasing well-being. I'd also like to see more research in the field, actually, particularly around this whole question of the third wave of positive psychology. Some of you who know a bit about positive psychology already will know that there have been two waves beforehand. The first one, which was focused on individual well-being. The second one, which was acknowledging the fact that actually there are many difficulties in life, and we should also acknowledge the negatives that occur in life. And then this really as the third wave. So looking at how we can expand positive psychology into different fields. So it would be good if we could push that research more. And I'd really like to see positive psychology expanding into different disciplines. So things like architecture, sport, politics, the economic system, and so on. So I think there's so much more room for doing research using positive psychology, which I think could benefit society. And it would be great to see that happen. So thanks very much for that question.
Does anyone else if the authors want to add to that? If not, I'll go on to another question. From Susanna Shikova, I think. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Is there a community of action you're hosting or hoping will spring up around the book? And I'll try and answer that. We certainly have tried to put all of that onto the website, which is just creatingtheworldwewanttoLivein.org. There's a lot more resources there for people to look at, and a way to join up and make comments there. Watch this space, we'll try and turn that into a bit more. The next question I had was from Philip. Has any political parties or politicians shown any interest in the ideas you're putting forward in the book? Again, others can maybe try and answer that, but
I could have a go. I mean, I know there's been a lot of interest, for example, in the whole question of mindfulness. And I know if Felicia were here, she would speak about the APPG on mindfulness that has been running in the Westminster Parliament for several years. I'm not sure exactly how many, but certainly I think politicians are becoming much more interested in that. And also we've had it's in the UK and in different countries in the world, we've been measuring well-being in various ways, so through the annual census and things like that. So there are many politicians, I think, who are very interested in the ideas of well-being. Of course, the application is another matter, and that's possibly where there's more work to be done. But I think certainly there are lots of politicians who are interested in the ideas that are, you know, coming out of positive psychology. I don't know whether anybody else wants to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I mean, they're certainly in the House of Lords, you've got people like Richard Layard, who's the founder of Action for Happiness, Gus O'Donnell, former head of the civil service, who are really kind of strong advocates of well-being science being put, you know, at the heart and centre of policy making. And I think it's, I mean, one of the things that we're hoping with this book is that these ideas, it's just kind of catalyzes thinking, because so much of the science has been focused on the individual, and it's a bit of a paradigm shift to think about how does this stuff get applied, you know, whether it's to a political system, to an education system, to how we approach health. But these things, that's why I tend to think about these things, the ideas of putting in the book as design principles that help us challenge. Well, actually, if we started a basis, you know, a health system that was about, you know, kind of really helping people kind of build on their kind of health factors rather than only tackling, you know, when they've got issues, you know, what would that look like? How would that be? How, you know, how would that look like long term? And I think a lot of it is about balancing the sort of, you know, we talk about wise action in the conclusion, and that is about kind of finding that kind of balance between me and we and long term and short term, and that's not easy. But I think it's what we hope with the book is that it's going to catalyze a bit more thinking along those lines.
Along that catalyzation, if I could just finish on that, the media has shown interest already in terms of MTV, who some of the MTV producers, particularly in Africa and parts of Europe, have started to look at the book in terms of a blueprint for further productions in their domain of making media for young people. I think that was, for me, a very strong sign of interest and the possibility that the book could get some legs in many domains, including politics. And I think in the main issue in all that is that, particularly for society, for community, and for media, and for health, it's compassionate participation that we're asking people to use and to join at all levels of our societies.
I also think that issues around well-being, I think partly because of the mental health crisis that we have, particularly with young people, issues of well-being have become much more centre stage, much more than they were. Unfortunately, although Scotland and Wales and places like New Zealand and other countries are doing quite well on those issues, Finland, for instance, one of the big issues that England still has, that individual, the problem is within a person rather than within society. So the whole book is around how do we move the focus from the me and the you to us and we, and I think that's what we've been trying to do. And there are lots of examples of that happening around the world at the moment, just a lot less of it in England at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, picking up on that, you say that New Zealand, in terms of Philip's question around politics, is New Zealand, I think it was a couple of years ago, initiated what they're calling a wellbeing budget. This was a framework set out by the Treasury, so the financial kind of arm of government, that looking at, you know, government expenditure, not just in terms of value for money, but also looking at the kind of well-being impact. And they have a framework of different you know, a whole different aspects of well-being, from kind of climate change, cultural stuff, as well as the kind of the psychological well-being factors that we're talking about. So New Zealand, I think at the moment, is a really good example of politics.
Yeah, and it's actually called the Wellbeing Economic Network, and there are a few countries. Iceland is one of them. It's New Zealand, it's Finland, it's Scotland, Wales, and Canada in the Wellbeing Economy Network of governments. So they are focusing on well-being in the financial budget. So I think that's a huge step, and it's interesting how many women are leading those countries. But
absolutely,
is it a coincidence or not, or what? Well, I don't know, but also just it's important to see all these changes, and it's important to see what we measure gets attention, and I mean, and what we focus on grows. So we need more focus on well-being and those things that we do know that will enhance or promote well-being, but because it doesn't just happen by itself. And I think that is also is the aim of the book, to how can we get the focus more on the well-being for all, leaving no one behind, related to the Sustainable Development Goals also from the UN. So we are living in very exciting times. There are so many things happening that is supporting, I think, this path that we are on. So yeah, we have there have been questions. How do we take this forward? There have been many ideas of how we can take this forward through media, through some courses, online courses, and how we can inspire others. And I think this is something that we need to do together, not something that just a small group can do. It's something that we need to do together as a society, as the whole society on this planet.
Sounds like a good point at which to stop, Dora. There are no more questions on the chat. So
thank you all just very much for joining us. It's really nice to see some familiar and unfamiliar faces as well. It's nice to see you all. It's good to have you here, and really thank you for your interest and your feedback. And we know that we are not just the 7 of us, that we are many who share this passion to have a positive impact on our world.
So should we celebrate? So
I think we need some celebration.
This work has been a labour of love. It's been a lot of hard work. And as you can imagine,
4 years of
authors. So we'd like to thank all my co-authors and thank all of you. And great to have it launched into the world.
And we have one last video to show to you.